Hello, everyone, and welcome to my lesson on Lev Vygotsky's social interaction theory. I think it's best before we begin to talk about who is Lev Vygotsky. Well, Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist who is most known for his theories on social learning and how it impacts the development of a child. His work in psychology began in 1924 when he attended the Institute of Psychology in Moscow. His extensive research during that time led to his theory of social development. Sadly, he died of tuberculosis at the age of 37, so as a result, his work is incomplete, but it's still being studied and explored by psychologists and educators today. To begin, before we delve into the theory, I think it's best to hear it in Vygotsky's words himself, what he actually believed. And he says that every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level, and later on the individual level. First between people, which is interpsychological, and then inside the child, intrapsychological. This applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to the formation of concepts. All the higher functions originate as actual relationships between individuals. So, to break down that quote by Vygotsky into simpler terms, let's think about the basic principles of his theory, which are that cognitive development of children is advanced through social interaction with other people, particularly those who are more skilled. He believed that social learning precedes development. According to Vygotsky, we learn everything on two levels, first through interaction with others, and then integrated into the individual's mental structure. Within these principles, there are three themes: the zone of proximal development, the more knowledgeable other, and scaffolding. Let's begin talking about what is the zone of proximal development. The zone of proximal development refers to the difference between what a learner can do without help and what he or she can achieve with guidance and encouragement from a skilled partner. So, proximal refers to those skills that the learner is close to mastering. So, if we look at this Venn diagram on the zone of proximal development right here, you can see one side is what the learner knows. The other side is what the learner does not know. And the middle shaded part is their zone of development, a zone of proximal development. And that's what they can do with the help and guidance of someone that is more knowledgeable on that task. To explain further, Vygotsky believed that when a student is in the zone of proximal development for a particular task, providing the appropriate assistance will give the child enough of a boost to achieve the task. To assist a person to move through the zone of proximal development, educators are encouraged to focus on three important components which aid the learning process. First, the presence of a more knowledgeable other, or someone with knowledge and skills beyond that of the learner. Second, social interactions with a skillful tutor that allow the learner to observe and practice their skills. And last, scaffolding, or supportive activities provided by the educator to support the student as he or she is led through the zone of proximal development. Let's take this theme of zone of proximal development and apply it to a practical everyday example. In this instance, we have a child who's learning to ride a bicycle without training wheels. She knows how to ride a tricycle independently, but she cannot ride her two-wheel bike without her father holding on to help balance the bike. With her father's help and some practice, she learns to balance herself and ride the bike without assistance. This leads us to the second theme, the more knowledgeable other, or MKO. Simply put, the more knowledgeable other is someone who has more knowledge and skills than the learner. This can be a parent, a teacher, or a peer. Whoever the more knowledgeable other is, they provide the needed instruction within the zone of proximal development. In the bike scenario, for example, The father is the more knowledgeable other. As the child becomes more skilled at the task, the more knowledgeable other can provide less guidance. This brings us to our third theme of scaffolding. Scaffolding refers to the temporary support given to a child by the more knowledgeable other. The more knowledgeable other adjusts the level of scaffolding in order to fit the student's current level of performance. If you think of scaffolding in terms of construction, the child is the builder, and the more knowledgeable other provides the scaffolding. In the bike example, the father, or the more knowledgeable other, provided scaffolding by giving verbal directions to the child and holding onto the bike for support. As the child gains balance, the father may let go briefly and rebalance the bike as needed until he no longer needs to provide support and the child is able to ride the bike independently. In the classroom, as students move through the learning process, support should be tapered off as well as it becomes unnecessary. The student will then be able to complete the task again on his own or her own. Let's take these themes now and apply them to a classroom setting. For example, in my kindergarten classroom, a main focus throughout the school year is teaching my students how to read. Many students begin the year knowing their letters and letter sounds, but they're unable to read a book. With assistance, they can sound out basic CVC words and recognize high-frequency sight words. This is their zone of proximal development, and I am their more knowledgeable other. In addition to guided reading with the teacher, I can further support their learning by offering buddy reading opportunities with a student who is already independently reading, or place them in small group learning opportunities with a peer, more knowledgeable other. So at this point, you might be thinking, how can I apply Vygotsky's theories to my classroom? The most important thing is to know your students and their individual zone of proximal development. In order to use the zone of proximal development and scaffolding techniques correctly, it's imperative that teachers know their students' level of knowledge. Without that knowledge, you can't teach a child within their zone of proximal development and utilize appropriate scaffolding. It's also important to encourage group work. Teachers can provide students with opportunities to work with peers in a group. They should be strategic in creating small groups that contain different skill and learning levels. In this format, more advanced students can improve their skills by acting as a more knowledgeable other to other students. Children learn a lot from their peers, so teachers can further this process by pairing less skilled children with more knowledgeable classmates. Teachers can also assign tasks that their students cannot complete independently but can complete with assistance to put them in their zone of proximal development. And teachers should also provide just enough assistance or scaffolding that the child learns to complete the task independently. Vygotsky's theory has had a significant effect on education. He promotes a student-led learning environment. In this format, teachers can provide critical thinking skills in their students by providing the appropriate amount of scaffolding and not offering too much help or too little. We want to give students an opportunity to complete tasks on their own before we jump in with the right answers or solution, and before students become frustrated or discouraged. Considering his theory is based on what a student can do if assisted by more knowledgeable peers or adults, Vygotsky's theory and collaborative learning go hand in hand. Classrooms have become collaborative learning environments where small groups of students can work together to share knowledge, exchange ideas, problem solve, and more. And as we began, so too I will end in Vygotsky's own words. He says, "Learning is more than the acquisition of the ability to think. It is the acquisition of many specialized abilities for thinking about a variety of things." So, as I conclude today's lesson, I leave you with some thoughts for reflection. First, what activities do you use to promote social development in your classroom? How can you apply Vygotsky's theories to your classroom? What types of activities and strategies do you use in your classrooms that incorporate Vygotsky's theory? And how do you or would you use the zone of proximal development or scaffolding in your classroom to differentiate instruction? And after reading about Vygotsky and his theory, do you feel that they align with your idea of education? Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. I leave you with this final thought. Keep calm and get in the zone.